Hey everyone, thank you for joining me to write down through an Orthodox Christian lens. I hope you all are having a great day, evening, morning, wherever you are when you see this video. And it's November 16th, 2025. I saw an interesting video today. I'm going to share parts of it with you. It has to do with women coming to the Orthodox Church, joining the Orthodox Church. Now we hear a lot about men doing that, but now we're going to be talking about women and their stories of why they came in and all that, are not too different than how men have come in regarding the history of the church and apostolic succession and, finding the truth. But let's hear what they have to say about us being women, what they say about how they see the church and as opposed to what churches or communities or whatever they came from before that. And I'm going to play that part for you. It's on the Transfigured Life YouTube channel, to let you know.
Viewers who are watching right now, you probably, if you are not already Orthodox, and maybe you're looking into Orthodox and you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, this Orthodoxy thing, they have bishops and they have priests and they have deacons and they have all these people and they're all men. This sounds like a patriarchal kind of religion. I don't know if I would go for that. Ladies, how did you feel coming into this patriarchal religion? Do you feel that the church values you and gives you honor? And what does the church mean to you as a woman in a church that would seem to the outsider coming in is dominated by men? I'm going to go in reverse order now. So Tammy, we're going to start with you.
I think so. I have the benefit of never have fallen down the feminist trap. So for me, I wasn't battling that, but I see so much more value in what the role of women in the church is, other than just standing up and preaching. I hear so many people from the Protestant tradition say, oh, we're so valued because we get to stand up in the pulpit and we get to teach, or we get to lead worship, or all of these things. And I'm like, wow, when you look at the history of the church, those weren't the roles of women. Women were doing the things that nurtured the church, on a more practical level. And then I look at all of the saints that we have that are women. I just see so much value in what women have done. They've set such high expectations that we are looking to achieve. And then the fact that the Theotokos is I would say second most important human being in all of the church. The fact that we get to literally have a relationship with her, and we understand that God chose a human being woman to be his home while he was incarnating, if you will. It's just not anything that was ever brought to the forefront of conversations when I came out of Protestantism. I see and there's more beauty in the role of women in the church. You see the women in our church, they're getting the coffee hour ready, for everybody to come into. They're helping to coordinate, keeping the church taken care of and keeping the church clean. And in our church, sometimes we're really tiny. Sometimes we don't have somebody to chant and read. And so when we don't have somebody that's trained to do that, the women step into that role. And so I don't know. I think that people say that it's something that they just will never change until they step into it and experience it.
Melody.
I would say for me, I also didn't really struggle with a feminist mindset per se, but as far as being in the Orthodox Church, I feel truly seen as a woman in a way that I didn't experience in Protestantism. Yeah. I think Protestantism, we tend to lean toward a lot of female writers, Protestant writers. They write self-help type religious books and things like that, and they're public speakers. but the Orthodox Church has a genuine foundation of female saints. And so when I walk into the church, I see women looking back at me on the icons. And not only that, I can study their lives and I can understand what made them such powerful witnesses to the faith, and what obstacles they had to overcome and what hardships they overcame. And having those models, having women's lives elevated to that degree is something that was never really discussed in Protestantism, not to mention the Theotokos, right? We didn't really talk about her much. And she's critically important in Orthodoxy. So she's certainly elevated, and we venerate her and we pray to her. But also having the lives of all of these saints. I know, you'll see in parentheses, my name says Mary. That's my baptismal name. And I chose Saint Mary Magdalene. Prior to my conversion into Orthodoxy, I didn't know much about Saint Mary Magdalene. I knew, what people had said about her in the faith, but I didn't understand who she was until I was studying the lives of various saints in order to choose a baptismal saint's name. And I was so struck by her story. And I feel like there are stories of thousands of women, female saints, that we miss outside of Orthodoxy. That if you don't take the time to read their lives, you don't see just how much the church elevates these women and their contributions to the faith.
Well said.
Thank you. Anastasia, by the way, that's my granddaughter's going to be her baptismal name next week on November 1st when I baptize her. She's Clara, but her baptized name will be Anastasia.
I love it. I know my it's actually my given middle name. I actually Orthodoxy, funnily enough, only skipped one generation in my family, and I didn't know that the rest of my family was Orthodox from Greece. So it's really amazing how God just brings you right back around to where you're supposed to be. But yeah, I wish I could say something more eloquent than these two lovely ladies already did. I actually was very feministic in my early 20s, like before I became Christian, and I was very, very, very liberal and had a lot of ideas about women and all of our gung-ho-ness. I actually didn't struggle with coming into the church when it came to the patriarchy or anything like that, because I really worked that out as a Reformed Presbyterian. I came kind of almost toxically the other way, this automatic submission, and it's not all people like that are Reformed Presbyterian, but there's a very large number, I would say, that the man definitely rules all, and the women aren't really given the same type of role in the marriage or in life. And like the other two said, coming to the church and seeing the saints, all these women saints who were just so revered, and the Theotokos being, like the second most important woman, in the church, it really kind of really freed me from that thinking that like the man is always on top and the women don't really have a place in the church unless it's like, here, I'm just going to make you some food or whatever. The women at my church they function like the entire church. It's insane. Like, yeah, they might not preach, they might not be in the pulpit, but like they keep it running. They're keeping it going. It's just truly beautiful.
Thank you. And Jamie.
Yeah, this question kind of made me giggle because my current priest, Father Alexander, I go to Holy Trinity Orthodox Cathedral in Chicago. It's one of the oldest churches in Chicago, so very, very historic place. It kind of made me giggle because he treats the women like equals. So I bake commemorative prospera for the church. And if I don't have it done, like I don't get leeway because I'm a girl. Like he's not like nice to me. He's not like happy with me. He makes it known like this is your responsibility. This is your ministry. Own it. Like, just like he would with the altar guys. I mean, they get a lot of heat as well. And so I think being valued equally is very, very important. Because I think that we do kind of maybe see some favoritism in some Protestant sects, if you will. But I would say being treated equally. And then, of course, like the other women said, having the female saints to look up to, and just their amazing lives. And my background, I was always pretty conservative, but I was definitely socially liberal. I did a lot of like amateur modeling in my younger years, and that included like bikini shoots, things like that. And those things and those photos up on the internet were always okay in my previous expression of faith. Nobody really batted an eye at that. But I think coming into Orthodoxy, it also gave me kind of more of a sense of dignity and modesty. And I have the saints to thank for that, seeing how they dressed and how they veiled. Those simple things, I think, really, really helped me. And ultimately helped my heart. It's not just an outward thing. It definitely sunk deep into my heart.
Okay, so this was the first part. He's going to ask them about what saints they like and all that, and I think I'm going to show you that part as well. But I want to go over this because I liked what they said, especially Melody's was quite insightful and profound. Things, women's lives are elevated, the saints, and in our church, and that things that women are doing the nurturing in the church. And I have heard them talk about, the Theotokos is the second most important woman. Actually, she is the first and the number one forever. The number one human woman, number one woman in all of human history. Nobody will ever replace her or take her place. She is the number one woman of all time. And then you have all the other saints, and I think it's really interesting. They talked about, Jamie talked about making prosphora. Yes, that's something that the women of the church usually volunteer to do that, and then that becomes their task, so to speak, as she was saying. There are so many different other things. There are so many other things too. I know that they think, some women are upset because they can't be a priest. They can't, perform or, perform the liturgy, the services. Well, if you think about it, the services and maybe doing some lectures, speakings at retreats, that's mostly what the men do. And that is really, their roles are more limited, in my opinion, because yes, you can have men who aren't in clergy, laymen, who are, but it's almost kind of like part of it's not really the clergy, but you have the chanters and but readers are considered part of the going up to the subdeacon and the deacon and all that. They do all that as well. But women, and I think men need to be in those positions more than women, because women already naturally, generally speaking, are nurturing at heart. Just their disposition it's in them to be nurturing. So it wouldn't be hard for them to do that. But in order for the males, sometimes men, and some men are very nurturing, but I'm just saying that for them, when they become ordained and all that, it's something they need to focus on as well, being pastoral through nurturing and fatherly figures to their flock. So women don't need to be in the clergy position. And now we all know why they're not in it, because that's just how the order of the priests through Old Testament on in Christ, was the main priest, and he did not change anything when he was on earth about that lineage, that line of priests. And, it went on after that with the apostles, the bishops, the deacons, the priests. So that's always been there. Now they say women are in a supportive role. Now remember, God created man and woman. and they are equal in his eyes. They just have different talents, different specialties, so to speak, that they do, that is special to them. In certain things, like having a baby, obviously, and, things like that. But, God created Eve from Adam's rib, which is his side, so they are equal. And she was created as his helpmate, which is like his partner. So they have a partnership, and there's mutual respect, mutual submission, mutual understanding of that. I know they'll talk about, the woman submits to the husband, and the husband is to be to die for the wife. Okay, as he represents Christ, she represents the church. Well, when done correctly, which is, I think, the hardest thing to do, since we're in a fallen world and there's a lot of us broken people, but that's how it's supposed to be. And women do a lot of things in church other than just what was mentioned there. They didn't get into details, but I can tell you from my own experience and from being and seeing this in the church for many, many years. I've been in the Greek Orthodox Church for the most part through these past, 30 or so years. And women are the ones that are usually the church school teachers. They also are the directors of the church school, like I was. They have the Philoptikos, which is a charitable organization for women, and they do a lot of things for the homeless and helping people in nursing homes, things like that, bake sales, things like that to help. But they also are usually in charge of outreach, and because of that. But even our church, before we had the Philoptikos, because it's a small church, so I was the director of outreach, and that means outreach and charitable activities, soup kitchen that I took, that we went to, doing Christmas carols at a senior citizen assisted living and nursing home as well. Nursing home. It was a nursing home. And, usually women are the ones doing that. Again, so they're doing that. They're usually doing the coffee hour. They also are, they can be choir directors. My sister used to be a choir director. They also they are the dance coordinators for the Greek dances, and maybe they do that in other jurisdictions like the Antiochian, maybe for the Lebanese dancers. I don't know, but I do know in mine that they always have a coordinator who's a female, setting up the traditional Greek dance at the Greek festivals. They also, yes, because they talked about they clean the church, they do this and that. Yes, they also, what did I get? What did I forget? Well, they're in the choir. They are, some of them are actually chanters. There are women chanters. There's one at our church, and she used to be a nun. She's in the world now, but she's a very pious gal, and she is there just about every week. She is there all the time, and she does a lot of the chanting, which is really beautiful. As if you ever heard of Icona, that's a 3-sister chanting group that it's well known in the Orthodox circles, that they have beautiful CDs with all the hymns from the church. It's really nice. So they do that. What else is there that I might have forgotten? Because we have so many things that women do. There also are women that lead the women's Bible study classes, Bible studies. I've done that before, actually. So that happens. And sometimes it's the priest's wife that does that. But in other cases, it can be somebody from the church. At least it was for me. And so there was that. They're also iconographers, they're nuns, they're abbesses. So there is a lot of things that women do in the church that I don't think people realize, that they do all these things. It's quite a lot. And, in marriage, as I said, it's a partnership. And it's the husband and wife working towards their salvation. And they do that through supporting and helping each other. So, the saints, the women saints, are very important because they had a lot of courage. They had a lot of amazing things they've been through, suffering and martyrdom. But it's amazing. There's really such an equality there between the saints, and there is no battle of the sexes, as they used to call it back in the 80s or 90s. There's none of that that is in the church, because of the fact of these roles complement each other, and it works out really well. So I'm going to just let you hear this one part, what they say about the church, the saints that they have taken for their names for the church and things like that, for when they get baptized or chrismated into the church.
To our viewers watching, especially our female viewers, you've heard these ladies here talk a little bit about how special Mary, the Mother of God, is. And we call her the Theotokos, the God-bearer. They've also mentioned female saints and their role in our church. So I want to travel back now and ask them this question. And I'm really asking this question for the benefit of our female viewers who may not be Orthodox and are watching this going, well, okay, you're saying women are special, but how special? So ladies, tell us about one or two female saints that you've been impressed with, that you've just fallen in love with. These are just lovely, inspirational women, whatever. Two female saints that you're rather fond of. Tammy, let's begin with you.
Well, I think that I probably just by default need to say the saint that I chose for my patroness, which is Saint Juliana of Osbrego, if I'm saying that correctly. It was... Well, I chose her kind of at the urging of my priest because she had a large family. And even with her large family, she still was able to find a way to have prolific outreach to her community. I read one story where there was a famine around them. And even though they were wealthy, they weren't spared the famine of her finding and gathering it was maybe like a seed or something that she made a bread out of that nobody had ever made bread out of, and that it spared this community around her from suffering from the famine as bad. And I kind of I feed people, and in general, that's kind of like my personal ministry to our church. Our church is small, and my godparents had told me a long time ago, if you do nothing else for the church, feed them. If you can bring a full meal to coffee hour to feed everybody, do that, because that, you have that capability to do that. And so I leaned into that. And then even at one point in her life, she wanted to go and live a monastic life. And her husband was like, no, you can't do that. And so she submitted to her husband's leading in that. He was like, you have other children to take care of, even though you've lost one and you're grieving. And so she did submit to that.
And let's understand why that is. This happens with, I just want to make a point on this. There are some married saints, and usually what happens is if one of their spouse dies, then they go off to the convent or they go off to the monastery, the women's monastery or the men's monastery, and live out their lives. They don't remarry, they don't do anything like that, okay? That's the way it's supposed to be, but, we live in a fallen world with a lot of broken people. We're all broken, we all need healing through Christ. So when she says, she submitted to him, yes, because in order for if let's say I was married and I wanted to go to the convent, or the monastery for women, I would have to have the okay of my spouse to do that. And vice versa. If my husband wanted to go and become a monk, I would have to okay that. It has to come from the spouses have to agree on it. So I just want to put that out there so you understand that.
Ended up obviously being probably what like ended her up being a saint, in the end. And I have a really strong and prideful personality. And so I saw what in her that I struggle with that I wanted to maybe foster in myself, like that part of her that I look up to. And then the other one is the saint of my godmother. It's Saint Amelia, the mother of saints. Mm-hmm. And just knowing that, where they ended up, is it Saint Basil and Saint Gregory?
Well, she had, I think, 7 or 8 children, and 5 of them are saints.
5 of them are saints, yeah. So the mother of saints, and just thinking that, the way she nurtured those children is probably in large part why they ended up being saints. And my friend that's my godmother, she has 5 children also. And I see that in her, just this prayerfulness towards her children. And it kind of I don't know, I feel like in Orthodoxy, we value motherhood greatly.
Yes.
And motherhood is something that I it's definitely a huge part of my identity. And so
I'm gonna give you a personal story on this when we're talking about Orthodox values motherhood very much. When I was at my church years ago, and I was doing all these things at the church, and I told my priest that, I just really feel like I don't get anything done outside the church. I mean, meaning I feel like I should have been doing more almsgiving, I should have been doing this, I should have been doing that. But, I was taking care of my children at home, and like I said, a special needs child. And, women in this culture tend to think that their job as a mother is less important than working outside the home. That's kind of the message that has been in this culture for quite a long time, several decades. And so I said that because, I was swimming in the culture, of course, it's very hard to get out of it. And he told me, when I feel like, I can't get all this work done, I can't get all the cleaning I needed to get done, he said, well, just do 1 room a day or a few tasks a day, and that's good enough. You don't have to do a lot. He said, but just remember, your most important job is to be a mother. And I've never forgotten that. And it is. It's a vital, important job. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Seeing that it's valued greatly, and that people, that women were declared glorified because of their motherhood, really, is, I don't know, I think those are probably 2 of the ones that speak the loudest to me.
Wonderful. Melody?
So I would say I have to speak on St. Mary Magdalene. I feel like she has so many terrible rumors about who she was as a person. I found her story particularly inspiring because she was a disciple to the disciples. Mm-hmm. And because of all of the people first of all, she was incredible.
And before I forget, yes, that's another thing. There are women disciples. What she's just mentioning there.
Incredibly brave, because she never turned her back on Christ. She was there for the crucifixion. She was there for the burial. She was there the next morning to anoint him. And so the fact that she stood fast in her faith, that her faith was so unshakable, is incredibly inspiring to me. And the fact that of all of the people on earth, of all of the disciples, Christ chose her to reveal his risen self to. Mm-hmm. He chose a woman.
That is paramount, very important. Yes, he chose that woman that was there. He knew she was going to be there. He chose her and had her go tell the disciples, which is huge.
And I think that story doesn't get told enough in
Right.
Protestantism or outside of Orthodox Christianity and perhaps Roman Catholicism. She's such an important figure, and she's such an inspirational woman to our faith. And that's why I chose her, because she wasn't a weak woman.
Nope.
She wasn't just someone who should be dismissed in history. She played an important role in the resurrection and in proclaiming the resurrection to the rest of the disciples. And she played an important role as a disciple to the disciples, and in her path walking with Jesus Christ, and then afterwards as an evangelist of the faith. So she's very important to me. I also have a soft spot for Saint Olga of Kiev. I think her story struck me, number one, because she was widowed, but she committed some really terrible and heinous things in her grief of her widowhood. But her story strikes me as particularly important because it shows that no one is outside the grace of God. And so when she committed her life to Orthodoxy and accepted her role as an Orthodox Christian, it led to the conversion of thousands of people into the future, right? And so despite her rocky past and despite her pagan beginnings and some of the terrible things she had done, she was able to transform in theosis and through Jesus Christ and the Holy Trinity. And so I find her life, her story is very wild, I think. It's not someone that I think when you start looking at the lives of the saints, you don't necessarily expect this particular person to have a past, but many of our saints have a past. And it just shows that no one is outside of the help of God. If you turn to him and you seek him, your life can be radically transformed. And as such, you can radically transform the lives of others.
Well said.
As the saying goes, every sinner has a past, every saint has a future.
Absolutely.
Melody just said something, dear viewers, that I want you to think about and maybe even look into if you're considering orthodoxy. Our women are not weak. If you look at the lives of these saints, they were bold, they were beautiful, they were smart, they were resourceful. They are incredible role models to even men. And I'm just so grateful that we have a church that has this plethora of saints, both male and female, both of whom are so inspirational that men can take as their patron saint women saints and vice versa. We have that freedom. So let's go on, Anastasia.
Okay, so I would say that I also need to pick my patron saint, who is not December 22nd, actually. It's the Virgin Martyr Anastasia of Rome, who is commemorated on October 29th. And I was told a while ago that you don't really pick your saint picks you.
Yeah.
And that's very, very true in this instant, because she wasn't who I was going to pick. I was going to keep the name Anastasia, but I didn't know which one I wanted to pick. And it just so happened that when I looked at the date that my baptism was going to be on, it was going to be the night before her feast day. And I was like, well, that's my Anastasia, obviously. So I pick her. Obviously, she grew up in a monastery from, I think, 3 years old. And she was raised by the abbess Sophia. And she was revered to be very beautiful. And the leaders at the time kept begging her to get married, have a husband, and they martyred her, they tortured her. They as they were torturing her, they were like, just give up, just get a husband. And she would say that Christ is my husband. And she was martyred and she was killed, and her bones were later found by the abbess Sophia. God told her where the bones were, and so she picked up her bones and they brought them back to the church. So her, for sure, the bravery in the face of adversity and persecution. So that's the first one. And then Saint Veronica is like my heart, in my heart so much. Her faith, she's told of in the Bible. She's the woman with the issue of blood. She's, if I just touched the hem of his garment, I could be healed. And there's something really incredible about that amount of faith that I really strive to. She's someone that I really, really look up to, and probably the saint that I feel the most comfortable praying to, and really kind of opened that door for me towards praying to the saints more. And I'm so sorry, I do have to take off my camera for just a moment here. So hang tight for me. I'll be right back.
In a moment, yeah. Jamie?
I would say so. One of the first female saints I learned about was Saint Perpetua, and Felicity. But I want to focus on Saint Perpetua just because. So she's a second century saint, and she was martyred in an amphitheater, Roman amphitheater, by a wild beast, and she was also a nursing mother. But what really struck me about this story was the retelling of what happened when she was being mauled. So it's written that she was mauled. The animal kind of got her to the ground, and she got up and started fixing her hair, and I don't know, that just really struck me because I think it just shows that she was trying to display dignity and bravery and her confidence in Christ, and kind of showing like, you can do all of this to my body, but you can't take away my faith and the trust that I have in what happens after this. But yeah, I remember the first time I heard her story, I just broke down in tears because it's like, I don't know, if I was in that situation, I would be curled up in a ball, like crying, and it's just, so I just think that just takes an incredible amount of faith to not fear what happens to your body. And then the second saint, I mentioned her earlier, Saint Elizabeth, the New Martyr. I absolutely adore her. She's the granddaughter of Queen Victoria. She married Grand Duke Sergei in Russia. She was a German Lutheran, and they were married for several years, and for the first 7 years she was still a Lutheran, and she was still wrestling with these issues of faith, and really allowing her husband to quote unquote catechize her, I guess, like really just asked her husband a lot of questions. And in her letter she talks about them going on a lot of walks and the things that he would say to her, and then he was assassinated, and her just kneeling down in the snow, like that visual of her kneeling down in the snow, picking up her husband's body parts to take back to bury is just incredible. And then she visited the assassin in prison, and she gave him the gospel and urged him to repent. And I just thought that is a perfect icon of Christ right there. And then after her husband died, I love that she didn't remarry. She just, and she denounced her life of royalty, and she became a nun. She did a lot of charitable works in Russia. She stayed in Russia, where her, husband obviously was a native. And then she ultimately also was martyred by the Bolsheviks. And if anybody wants to read her letters, I mean, they're available on the internet, and they are just incredible.
Wow, great stories from these women about these wonderful, wonderful women saints. Just beautiful. Obviously, I'm from St. Dorothy, and I did not know who I was named after as far as saints go, because my mother didn't understand. I mean, my mother followed a Greek tradition, so my sister was the firstborn, and she was named after my my mother's mother, and then I was the next one, and so I was named after my dad's mother. That's how it works. If it would have had boys, it would have been obviously the father's father and all that. And so my dad, as you know, he was not Orthodox, and neither was his mother, and so I didn't think I had it. I didn't think anybody had a Dorothea, and there is. So there's that, and then I found that out because a dear parishioner of mine who died a couple of years ago, a very pious Palestinian Orthodox Christian who was our chanter for decades. He passed away from cancer a couple of years ago, and he had, it was when I came to this church back in like 2007, 2008, somewhere around there. I think it was like 2007 when I started to go to that church there. And he gave me this little pamphlet on this Saint Dorothea, and I didn't even know that she existed. So I felt really, it was just what a blessing to get that. He's like, here's your saint. And I said, okay, it's my saint. And then I always, I love Saint Gavrila. As I told you, the abbess, she was known as Mother Gavrila in her book, The Ascetic of Love, one of my favorite books ever. She really inspired me to have a better understanding of the world view, a world view, perspective on the whole world. And so I just think this is important to share, because you don't always hear what women feel like when they come to the Orthodox Church, because we've been hearing the steady stream of men coming in the past 2 or 3 years, as Father Jonathan was saying at the beginning of that video. But here we're talking about the females, the women that have come in, and yeah. So I wanted to share that, and how men and women are revered in our church, Orthodox Church, and their special roles, and how equal they are, and how strong and wonderful and so great saints, and such a great community of how this church works. Like I said, all the things involved in taking care of God's house and his community. So I hope you got a lot out of that, and maybe perhaps learned some things about what was shared here. And thanks again for watching, for following my channel, and I hope you have a blessed evening. Until next time.